The Combine man's hand came off the orb fast, faster than a man that size should be able to move. He held it against his chest and didn't say anything for a moment, just stared at the crate where the orb sat in its packing foam, black and still, and the size of a melon, with those bronze meridian rings locked tight around it like they'd been soldered there. 300 years without moving. The manifest listed it as inert mineral weight, 42 kilograms of extinct decorative craft. I had carried it for 6 weeks and never thought twice. "You," he said, pointing at me, "open it." His name was Preth. He ran the Kesh Combine boarding detail, 4 men, a cutter ship, and enough authority in this transit corridor to do whatever he wanted with a solo freighter and her one-man crew. They had been in my hold for 11 minutes. In that time, 2 of his people had tried to lift the orb from the foam, and both had pulled back with red palms. Preth himself had just tried with gloves on. I had watched the leather blacken at the fingertips before he let go. "I don't know how to open it," I said. "It came aboard sealed. The manifest says it doesn't open." "The manifest," Preth said, "says a lot of things that aren't true." He wasn't wrong. The orb had been loaded at Relay Sec by a broker I'd never met, consigned to a collector on Varun Station. Good rate. No questions on either end. I had told myself that was normal. In this corridor, normal and illegal lived in the same building. Preth crossed the hold in 4 steps and took my wrist. Not rough, methodical. He pressed my palm flat against the orb's surface the way you'd place a tool against a fitting to check for contact. I felt warmth. Not the ambient warmth of the hold. Something underneath the obsidian, something that had been waiting at a very low temperature for a very long time and had just now decided the temperature was right. I tried to pull back. Preth held my wrist. The bronze meridian rings, which had not moved in any of the 6 weeks I'd owned the transit contract, which had not moved when the Combine men burned themselves on the surface, shifted. 1 degree, maybe less, enough to hear. "Keep your hand there," Preth said. "I'm not doing anything." "Keep it there." The second ring moved. I could feel the mechanism through the obsidian, precise, unhurried, the way a very old lock sounds when the right key finally finds the tumbler. Not grinding. Seated. 300 years of stillness, and it moved like it had been maintained yesterday. The glyph on the northern face lit first. Pale blue, then brighter, a thin line of light tracing a character I didn't recognize, following the carved groove like water filling a channel. Then the glyph on the southern face. Then the 2 at the equator. The hold went blue around us. One of Preth's men took a step back without being told to. "What is that?" Preth said. Not a question. More like a man reading something written on a wall in a language he didn't study. I didn't have an answer. My hand was still on the surface. The warmth had climbed past warmth into something else, not heat, not pain. Recognition was the word that came to me later when I had time to find words. At the time I just held still and felt the rings turn. The 3rd ring unsealed. The 4th. The orb's equatorial seam opened by 2 millimeters and the blue light came out of that gap in a clean line, horizontal, rotating slowly with the rings. A sound came with it. Not loud. A low, sustained tone, the kind that gets into your back teeth. Preth raised his weapon and pressed it against the side of my head. "Finish it." "I told you, I'm not doing anything, it's doing it." He didn't lower the weapon. I didn't move my hand. The orb kept turning. The 5th ring. The seam opened to 5 millimeters. The light changed, the pale blue deepened, went almost violet at the edges, and the rotating beam widened until it was painting the bulkheads in slow arcs. In those arcs I could see the glyphs moving. Not carved anymore. Projected. Hundreds of them, small and precise, scrolling past the walls of my cargo hold like a record being read aloud. I learned later what they were. Coordinates. Every Kesh Combine holding, depot, and transit lane in this sector. 3 decades of operation logged in the orb's memory and broadcast in a compressed IWC standard signal. Pack at the moment the 6th ring turned, and the orb completed its sequence. At the time, all I knew was that the tone changed pitch and the orb opened. It didn't open like a box. The obsidian surface dissolved, that's the only word that fits, from the equatorial seam outward, revealing the interior, a hollow sphere of bronze lattice, dark with age, and at its center a single suspended point of light, warm gold, motionless. The light was older than anything I had ever stood next to. I could feel the age of it the way you feel the cold coming off a glacier before you've touched it. The voice came from that point of light. It wasn't loud. It was clear in the way that very few things are clear. No distortion, no effort, no apology for the 300 years it had spent waiting to say this particular sentence to this particular person. You were always the keeper. Preth's weapon was still against my temple. His hand was shaking. I don't think he knew it was shaking. I looked at the light. The light, as best I can describe it, looked back. Keeper of what? I said. My voice came out steady. I'm still not sure how. The light didn't answer that. It didn't need to. The IWC packet had already transmitted. The orb's registry, buried in its activation sequence, and now flagged to every IWC receiver in a 40 light-minute radius, had already appended my name to a lineage entry 3 centuries cold. Vardek line, keeper designation, holder status active. Preth lowered his weapon. I don't know if he made a decision or if his arm simply ran out of certainty. He stepped back. His men were already at the hold entrance. The cutter ship disengaged from my hull 12 minutes later. They were gone before I had moved my hand from the orb's surface. The Combine crew was waiting at Varan Station when I docked. Not for me, for them. IWC enforcement had the docking arm sealed before the Kesh Combine cutter finished its approach. The coordinates the orb had broadcast were enough. 3 depots, 2 transit lanes operating without charter, 1 holding facility that the IWC had been trying to locate for 9 years. The Kesh Combine was dismantled by a registry packet that fit inside a single activation pulse. The collector who had hired me to transport the orb turned out not to exist. The broker at RelaySec was a forwarding address and a closed account. Whoever had loaded the orb onto my ship had known something about bloodlines and probability, and the patience required to move a 300-year-old instrument into the hands of the right carrier. I still don't know who that was. The IWC registrar at Varan processed my lineage certification in 4 hours. Standard procedure, she told me, for a keeper designation coming out of dormancy. There was a form. There was a fee waiver. There was a laminated card with my name on it and the Vardek seal pressed into the lower corner, a circle of 6 interlocked rings which I recognized. I asked the registrar what a keeper was supposed to do. She looked up from her terminal. Keep it, she said. Then, after a pause like she was deciding whether to say the rest, the Vardek line held navigational sovereignty over 4 transit corridors for 2 centuries. When the last keeper died without nomming a successor, the corridors went dark, unclaimed. The orb went into the freight system. She looked at me steadily. That was 307 years ago. I thought about the broker at RelaySec, the good rate, the no questions on either end. Someone put it where I'd find it, I said. That's the working assumption, she said, and went back to her terminal. I carried the orb back aboard the Ocean Dull and set it in the foam in the forward locker, where I could see it from the pilot's seat. The gold light at its center had dimmed back to something barely visible, a slow pulse, patient, like a thing that had learned to wait and had not yet decided to stop. I had carried it for 6 weeks without knowing what it was. It had known what I was from the moment it felt my wrist. That was 3 months ago. I still run cargo in this corridor. The rate is good and the questions are few, which is how I prefer it. The orb travels with me. The 4 corridors of the old Vardek charter are on my nav display now, marked in pale gold, waiting. Nobody has tried to take it since Preth. I don't think they will. I was always the keeper. I just needed someone to make me reach for it.